Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Boruto anime review. This one is going to be for episode 219. So this was a little bit of a sort of epilogue to the big action that we've had over the last couple of episodes. It looks like we're going to be, I suppose, finishing off our touching on manga content next week. And then we'll be into anime original stuff for quite a while because we're basically a setup arc away from being caught up to the manga. And if they were to just continue on, I think we get maybe 4 or 5 episodes and be right there caught up. They don't want to do that, so they're going to leave it a while until they have a lot of content to animate. So this is what we got here. And in my mind, the overall way I describe this adaptation is that in all of the little things, this was an improvement over the manga. But the changing of one major scene, or at least fan favorite, fan hyped scene, brings it back down to earth, like, completely. Like, all of the work that you did in terms of adding this in, that in, this scene here, was really negated by the fact that you cut the Ishiki talking to Code scene really short, leaving out all of the truly interesting information from it. And sure, I'll talk about it, there's maybe ways for them to bring some of that information back in, but fundamentally, during this sequence of like pages from the manga, this was the scene that you wanted them to do accurately, and they didn't. And it's like, why? Thankfully, I think in the last while, there's maybe been 2 or 3 scenes like this where they've just haven't maybe adapted it all that well. Otherwise, the anime has, in my mind, been an improvement over the manga quite heavily. But moments like this just make me go, what are they doing? Like, why are you overthinking this? This is just a scene where you should adapt it correctly. I think the only thing I can really come up with as to why they maybe didn't is just that the impression I get from the arc in the manga that happens after where we are right now in the anime is just that the writing team, the creative team, isn't entirely sure on where exactly they want to commit to with the story. I definitely got the sense over the next couple of chapters that they were like, oh, this is the direction we're going in, and then they changed it, and so that's why a lot of the chapters after this feel very like light on content and all setup. That all they really have is like, okay, these are the characters that we want to involve in this, but we don't really know exactly what way we want to integrate them all together. And maybe this is the anime finally making the decision on, okay, this is the story direction we're heading in, but we'll see where we go. Overall, like I said, a lot of the little scenes that were added in here, I think, worked quite nicely. Of just, you know, you accurately did the moment while they were still in the other dimension and how they get out. Boruto is the only one with the powers, space-time ninjutsu that can actually get them out. So attention turns to Kawaki to help Boruto kind of control the karma to be actually able to get them out. So he basically just gets Boruto angry, and in Boruto's anger, he activates the space-time ninjutsu. They all head out. We get the cool scene of, you know, Amado and everyone talking, Katasuke, and Shikamaru gets the word that everyone is back. It's a success. They've succeeded. Everyone is fine, even though there are injuries and so on. And we get that moment. I liked the addition on the rooftop where they come back. Sarada is up on the roof. Boruto apologizes to Sarada for being responsible for Sasuke losing his eye. And this wasn't there. Like, it just addressing the idea that, like, Sarada knows what exactly happened to a degree. Obviously, Boruto doesn't explain exactly what happened, but that Sarada is understanding of, like, I don't blame you for this. In a battle like this, something like this was going to happen. It's a very sort of responsible, I suppose, way to view the situation. Similarly, Sasuke also doesn't blame Boruto because he, again, knows the situation. And then in the aftermath of that, I actually really liked that they had the scene of Sasuke and Naruto with Sakura and Katasuke getting the reports on basically a checkup on where they're at after the battle. Unfortunately, I think it was just the idea of this scene was good. The actual execution I thought was kind of like pointless because they didn't say anything new. In that Sasuke's report was like, "Oh, without your eye, you can't use your eye powers," and it's like, really, really, you didn't think that we already like knew that from the get go that like missing the Rinnegan, you can't use the Rinnegan. Thanks. Because that was the only that. Yes, he was injured in other ways, but that was the most sort of significant thing in terms of like life changing, I suppose, for Sasuke is just that he doesn't have that eye anymore. I guess it's confirmation he can't just, I suppose, regrow it or something like that. But, or like it can't be like remade, which makes sense. But it was just like you had an opportunity in this scene to actually better explain the situation and status of the two most powerful characters on the hero side of things and where they're at now. And you effectively just pointed out the obvious. Even Naruto and the update he got from Sakura was just exactly what Kurama said at the end of the last episode, which is that you're not a superhuman anymore. She specified, you don't have superhuman chakra, and he's like, oh yeah, that I understand that, it felt like I was cheating. The only addition was just that like you won't be able to use the same types of jutsu, which again was kind of obvious, but it didn't explain to us, well, what can he use? Because he's still an Uzumaki, so he still has a large amount of chakra. That was obviously enhanced by being a Jinchuriki and having a tail beast. But the whole idea is that an Uzumaki, because they have so much chakra, is able to survive a tail beast extraction, and that's why that's sort of a significant thing. So Naruto should still be able to do like a lot of shadow clones. Maybe not like thousands like he kind of can do right now, but he should be able to still do a lot of them. And then because he's more experienced, he should be able to just rely more on being sort of a normal ninja here. So it's one of those things where like I get what the scene was trying to do, but I just thought it was like a little on the nose in terms of I like the idea of this, but you had nothing for these characters to say because I'm guessing they're not far enough or thinking far enough ahead to where we're actually going to see Naruto and Sasuke in action again to clarify at this point like what exactly they can and can't do. In that, like, sure, Sasuke still has all the Mangekyo Sharingan and Sharingan abilities, and Naruto just is going to have some things, but we don't really know what they are. But still, it was nice enough. Kawaki and Boruto get the update from their checkups that, yes, as was mentioned earlier, both of them are part Otsutsuki now. Both of their bodies are 80% Otsutsuki. So that's very interesting to know. That's why they can be used as a sacrifice to the Ten Tails to make a divine tree. That even Kawaki, without the karma mark, is still, his body has been altered and he is now part Otsutsuki. So that's significant. And Boruto is still extracting with Momoshiki's karma mark. So he's 80% and going up. And he is now sort of the threat and the focus of kind of the story in terms of something big happening. Obviously, at this point, the attention turns to highlighting Code because, as they point out, Kara should be gone at this point because, Ishiki's gone, Bora's already been dealt with. They still think Kashin Koji is dead, even though we as the audience know he escaped because the Toad monitor thing went off. They're like, Delta's been dealt with because Amado has already deactivated her and the extra bodies for her are also dealt with. So he turns his attention to explaining Code and his unique situation with the white non-vessel karma mark, which is the powers of the karma, but it doesn't work as a reincarnation vessel. So Code is extremely powerful, but he can't be used as a vessel. They also, I suppose, more heavily establish here the idea that he's sort of like this zealot to the Otsutsukis, that he is all about worshipping them, and to him Ishiki was his god, and now his god has been defeated, and now he has been passed on the will of the Otsutsuki, as we'll get to in just a second. Other interesting point here is that Amado does explain that there were multiple other cyborgs whose power is higher than Ishiki's. So that's huge. That is a massive reveal, and it's a setup for characters who are going to be introduced coming up. And just again, wait, Amado, can we go back a second here and actually address how is your level of science and technology like 10 times above anyone else's? That needs to get an explanation sooner rather than later, because there's multiple questions beginning to grow surrounding Amado. So that's something that needs to happen here. Because just him casually saying that, like, oh yeah, I can make androids that are just as powerful as like an Otsutsuki. Now, admittedly, the context of that, I suppose, is referring to more powerful than sort of Jigen, the Jigen form, rather than the like fully resurrected form. But still, that form of Jigen was able to defeat Naruto and Sasuke. So this is a huge reveal here that Amado can just, alter people to become more powerful than, at least partial Otsutsuki strength. So that's absolutely insane. And just like, who are these other people? Where are they? He says they've been disposed of because Ishiki wanted to remain the most powerful, and that Code has a limiter placed on his power, otherwise he would be more powerful, and that Code asked for this, but that he can't remove the limiter himself. So, obviously setting up the idea that Amado is the only one who can remove Code's limiter, and that's going to be something that comes up as we go forward. So that leads to what still is probably the most significant part of the episode, even though this is probably the point at which there's going to be the most criticism for this episode of the anime, is that they really heavily cut this scene down in the anime. The spirit of Ishiki appears before Code, who's watching over the Ten Tails, which makes sense. Like, it is his power that is in that white karma mark. So the last lingering aspect here, he's able to sort of appear for these last few seconds to, the last aspect of his power that's left. And he just explains the whole thing about the non-vessel white karma mark, and that it now turns to his most loyal subject, Code. You now possess the will of the Otsutsuki going forward. I like the characterization of Code here, that he's very respectful towards Ishiki. He's shocked that his resurrection has been failed. He, of course, we get across the jealousy aspect with Kawaki, that Kawaki was the vessel who Ishiki wanted, but Kawaki didn't want that, and so that's why he hates Kawaki. So that's an interesting setup for like those two characters meeting and establishing that dynamic. But pretty much he kind of leaves it at that. It's in the anime, the big line is about the will of the Otsutsuki. You now have it. What exactly that necessarily means is kind of up to interpretation, as is presented here. Whereas in the manga, there's lots more dialogue that happens between them before it ends. So I'll just read this out here, because I think it's important to have this context in terms of, I'm guessing this stuff will be maybe added in later on, but we'll see where it goes. And you shall inherit the Otsutsuki will, in addition to that white karma Code. My soul will dissipate shortly, but I cannot allow the Otsutsuki will to be snuffed out as well. Not when we have devoured countless planets and continuously evolved over thousands of years. What would you have me do? Kawaki or Uzumaki Boruto, consecrate either of them to the Ten Tails and cultivate a divine tree. Then procure the chakra fruit that the divine tree bears. It is the crystallization of a planet's life. It shall contain everything, a record of all life that ever lived and died on this planet, including me. Eat it and upgrade yourself, Code. Do that, and you yourself will become a new Otsutsuki. Then go forth and devour planet after planet across space. Keep evolving until you become a peerless, unique existence, a god. That is the Otsutsuki will. And then Code actually goes on to ask, and this happens off screen, the final thing he asks of Ishiki is, tell me the names of the people who defeated you. And this starts the idea of his quest for revenge. Now, that aspect of the conversation, I'm assuming, will just get resolved when he meets the first of these decommissioned cyborgs, a character who's going to be, Code is going to go to meet next. I don't know when that's going to happen in the anime. I'm guessing it'll be months before that happens. But her abilities will allow her to basically relay that information to Code. The whole explaining the will of the Otsutsuki, I'm guessing the way they're doing this is that you sort of know what that is just from what Amado explained a few episodes ago. And then the idea is, I guess, that Code just knows what that is. But I think that there's some new information here that obviously is just not presented in the anime. That being that if Code, a non-Otsutsuki who is not being Otsutsukified, he just has the power because of the karma. If he eats the fruit of a divine tree, he will become an Otsutsuki. That's completely brand new information that we didn't know about before. That presents a lot of really really dynamics and things to consider, and it presents a really clear goal for Code. This is why he needs to focus on Kawaki and Boruto, because he needs to sacrifice someone else to the tree to get a fruit, to become an Otsutsuki himself. And it's this big transition of his story from being the ultimate supporter of an Otsutsuki to his quest to become one himself and fulfill the will of Ishiki, his god. And then the most significant thing is, of course, the idea that, yes, the Otsutsukis want to gain power by continuously devouring planets and eating the fruit on all these trees. They want to become true gods. And you could maybe say that was kind of obvious, but especially the way it's presented here. Look at that image. I think that's what everyone in this episode was waiting to see. The animation of this panel here, of sort of the ultimate form of an Otsutsuki, that when they've consumed hundreds, thousands of trees, and the Otsutsuki clan, with how they work, becomes so powerful that they have literally the powers of gods. That would have been so cool to see. Now, maybe it's too much of a sort of spoiler ahead of the ultimate goal, and in the anime they're making the choice to keep that reveal of sort of Code's plan until much later on. I don't really know what that is, just because this is one of those situations where if when they finally got to some sort of an Otsutsuki god form actually happening in the manga, it doesn't have to be exactly like this. It can look differently. This is just presenting you a visual to get across that it's going to be this crazy new form that you've never seen, never imagined before. So there's that. Other than that, I suppose the main thing to get into is Boruto then goes on TV. Katasuke ends up getting Boruto in the middle of all of the headlines, that he was the one who was kind of key in helping everything. Of course, they get across the idea that he's effectively having to lie about exactly what happens. He's not being sort of truthful about the exact extent of what happens because, it becoming public knowledge that Naruto and Sasuke are heavily depowered now, and exactly what happened, his situation with regards to the karma mark, that's not good. So he's just doing the sort of PR thing as the hero of this story. Team 7 has been, temporarily put on, no missions until Boruto's situation is dealt with. And especially now that they, I suppose, better understand the sort of conditions for Momoshiki to appear, it makes complete sense. They don't want Boruto going out on missions where if he overextends himself, there's an Otsutsuki level threat that's just about to happen. That he uses one Rasengan too much, and all of a sudden effectively a threat level equivalent to what just happened is happening again. They can't have that. So it's a responsible decision from the village to, kind of keep them under surveillance and, keep Boruto in the village, under lock and key to a degree, while they figure out some way to potentially reverse or stop the progression of him becoming Otsutsukified. The other thing we get here is Sumire. They are bringing her a little bit more into the spotlight here, and specifically with her feelings towards Boruto. They are making it abundantly clear that she likes Boruto in a romantic way. Now, this was sort of obvious from before that this was one of the ships. You would definitely say with Boruto, the ships are either Boruto Sarada or Boruto Sumire. Boruto Sumire, for the most part, has been the one that they've teased a little bit more. Of course, as ever with a shonen, the guy character is very oblivious to all of this, and most of the development is on the girl side of things. But at least they're being a little bit more obvious with it, and depending on how next episode goes, there probably should be another little tease of, does Sumire like Boruto? But yeah, I'm guessing this is just the anime making that commitment to, yes, this is a thing that you should kind of keep your eye open for to a degree, that this is, I suppose, the kind of Naruto Hinata dynamic of this show. So we'll see where that goes. There's obviously a lot of ground to cover. We'll see what happens, but fair enough. I don't mind romance being in this. I actually prefer that they bring it to the spotlight rather than trying to rush it all in at the end at times. I'd much rather you actually do a developed romance, and making this clear is at least a first step with regards to this. Even though, of course, with Boruto, he's got so much else to deal with that I don't think they're actually going to develop his side of this. And it probably will end up being a little bit more like a Naruto Hinata type thing, but without a movie to really get across the romantic side of things. But we'll see where that goes. I appreciate they're at least mentioning it. I think that's pretty much everything I want to talk about with this episode. Next week, it looks like they're going to have to do the last bit of the sort of epilogue that they want to do before they stop. I do wonder, will they tease any of the what Code is doing next stuff before we go into the kind of anime original stuff, which looks to be a tuning exam arc, which could be very fun, but I also get the impression Boruto probably can't be involved in this. That's the interesting thing here, is that, Team 7, are they just going to be held back down? Who's going to be involved in this or not? Obviously, the teaser for next week's episode is that, there'll be a Kage meeting where Naruto is going to be asked effectively, how do you plan to deal with Boruto if the nuclear bomb goes off, effectively? So, that scene's from the manga. It'll be interesting to see the voice acting performance, how they do that. And yeah, just how much they kind of go into the next few chapters before we take our kind of break from manga content. But that's been my thoughts. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on this episode. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.